In the last year, after some reflection, I realized I wanted to be more mindful around decision making and also just slowing down overall. And here's 3 things that I learned in practicing mindfulness for the entire year. Over the years, I've come to realize that I can be a busybody. I have shared that in other videos, but I really, because of me being South Asian and being an immigrant, I've realized I really like multiple things on my plate, and that's just been completely natural to me. And as I've learned more about mindfulness, where I've trained in mindfulness-based stress reduction, I utilize mindfulness in my profession, in my sessions with my clients, and I realized that I wanted to sort of embody it more than just the day-to-day practice that I was doing in my work. And so I made a commitment in the last year that I was gonna make sure that every time I make a decision, I'm gonna ask myself a couple questions on whether this is something that's gonna serve me short-term or long-term as well. And the other thing that I was gonna do is I was gonna be a little bit more okay with slowing down. Now, this may seem as completely just, that's not that big of a deal, but it really was a big deal for me because, as I said, I'm a busybody, so slowing down is really something I had to work on. And so the 3 things that I learned while I was being more mindful kind of surprised me. Some of it allowed me to have more awareness, and I want to sort of share what my reflections were from this year. So the first thing that I learned was it was extremely uncomfortable. And when I say uncomfortable, I really mean uncomfortable. And so I just want to first say that if you are trying something new, if you're trying to break a pattern or a habit that you have, and if you're uncomfortable, you are exactly where you need to be. And so I hope that you understand that that's so incredibly normal when we try to make a change. It's not something that we are naturally gonna embrace, because change isn't something that we naturally embrace as human beings, whether we would like to believe it or not. So one of the things that were so incredibly uncomfortable was just sitting in the emotions of when I wanted to make a decision in the past. If I wasn't busy, or if I had more slots open, or if I had more time, I would quickly just fill it up with more things to do. And I wouldn't think about it at all. I would just completely, I see a break, I see an empty space on my calendar, I'd fill it up. And then months later, I would literally sit there and be like, why am I so busy? Because I hadn't actually slowed down to think about how this is gonna support me in the next 4 or 5 months. And so as I was looking at opportunities and things that were coming my way, I really was asking those questions of how does this serve me short-term and long-term? And what I realized sometimes is that it would be great for short term, but it wouldn't necessarily be great for long term. And so I made the uncomfortable decision sometimes to not take those things on. And I could feel my body completely just being very uncomfortable in saying no. And I am someone that takes a lot of pride in being confident and knowing who I am. And so it was really surprising that those uncomfortable feelings were a little bit uneasy for me. The second thing that I learned is it allowed me to be in more alignment with what were the things that I wanted to do. So one of the things that I wanted to do this year was start my YouTube channel. I'm very grateful for my partner to be supporting me in doing this. And it was sort of this uncomfortable space to allowing myself to put myself out there. But my intention and my goal really has been to want to have more conversations around mental health, especially in the South Asian community, especially as a person of color, because we don't talk about it as much as we need to. I'm really grateful that the conversation is changing, and I wanted to be part of that conversation in being open and normalizing the mental health and well-being that we all are struggling with and we're all working through. So I really wanted to be more involved in that conversation. And when I was being more mindful this year, it allowed me to sort of think of my decisions from that value that I really want of around being more connected to conversations around mental health. And so when I was making decisions or when I was looking at opportunities, it really helped me look at slowing down enough to ask myself, does this really align with what I want to do long term? Does this really align with how I want the conversations to be around mental health and well-being? Or am I just picking a side gig up that's gonna support me maybe financially for the next month or so, but doesn't necessarily align with the value that I have? And that was very eye-opening because up until this year, I didn't realize that sometimes I let my fears drive my decisions. What a surprise. I know many of us do that. And it was really interesting that I was, as I'm looking back at some of the decisions that I've made in the last year, I was picking some things that would get me to a goal, maybe financially, but wouldn't necessarily push me or challenge me more to move past my fear. And so as I became more mindful in this year, as I was more intentional in my decisions, it really made me more aligned to want to do the things with the long-term goal in mind of being someone that is having these conversations more openly and more frankly. The final thing that I learned this year is I thought I was taking care of myself and being mindful around self-care, but I really had moments where it made me realize that I could sometimes also do a little bit more better job about taking care of myself. Now, this wasn't from a place of judgment, blame, or shame, but it kind of made me realize that sometimes when I have breaks, I tend to want to think of, let me check my email, or let me do this other thing, let me get more busy. And because I had made this commitment to be more mindful, it sort of allowed me to give myself permission to want to be able to take breaks and not feel guilty about taking breaks. I know, especially in the South Asian community or as a person of color, that is so incredibly common where we're driving ourselves to want to be more productive and wanting to do things more. And I hope that you all realize that it's okay to give yourself a break. It's okay to really take care of yourself, because in doing less, I actually did a lot more because I had more bandwidth to do things. I had more emotional capacity and energy to want to be more open-minded to things, to challenge myself in ways that I wouldn't have challenged myself had I not given myself that time to rest and recover. This is something that I really also want to have a conversation on. So starting in January 2024, I'll be having live sessions on my Instagram. So please follow me at the Indian Counselor on Instagram for joining me for those live sessions. And the very first one that I'm gonna be talking about is around self-care and some of the barriers that come up around self-care, because that was something that I really, thought I was really good at. I understood the concept of self-care from me studying about this in graduate school, and to embody it was a little bit different and brought up some things that I hadn't thought about. So I would love to know, what was some of the commitments you all made this year and how did you feel you did? Were there some similarities that you resonated with in terms of my reflections around mindfulness that you noticed for yourself? Let me know in the comments below. As I mentioned, please follow me on social media at the Indian Counselor. There's lots of content coming and live sessions coming as well on Thursday evenings, starting January 11th. And please subscribe to this channel and follow me at the Indian Counselor.